Someone recently sent me a book that I believe was meant to guide me back to Christianity. Receiving the book, Truth Matters, Life Matters More, was a surprise, particularly when I noted the author, Hank Hanegraaff. I'd almost forgotten about him until this book arrived, so I decided I should do a book review on it. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Hank Hanegraaff, he is the voice behind the popular radio show Bible Answer Man, and he serves as president of the Christian Research Institute. For a long time, he was an evangelical Protestant, using his platform primarily for apologetics. However, his 2017 conversion to Greek Orthodoxy led many Christian radio stations to drop his program. Now, to tune into his insights, one might need to scour the podcast platforms. Given my lengthy work commute, I opted to order the audiobook to experience this book with. And I was especially intrigued since Hanegraaff himself narrated it. Listening to his voice transported me back to the late 80s and 90s, when as a child, during those times, my family car rides were typically accompanied by Christian talk radio. The Bible Answer Man would be airing just as my family members would collect me from school. Daily, I'd hear Hanegraaff dissect perceived apostasies within the modern evangelical church. Through him, I learned about various cults and figures like Benny Hinn, the Moonies, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and others who deviated from his brand of evangelical Protestantism. But when high school came and I started driving myself to school, with it came the liberty to control my own radio dial. Hanegraaff faded from my daily routine. Yet just yesterday, as I heard his familiar voice on my car stereo, it transported me back to those uncomplicated days of my youth, even as I sat in the gridlock of a traffic jam on the San Francisco Bay Bridge. All nostalgia aside, this book is quite a wild ride. To start with, the introduction is written by Lauren Green, who's the chief religion correspondent for the Fox News Company, which is probably fitting for a book like this. The book is divided into two sections. The first section is warmed over apologetics arguments. As I was listening to this section on the audiobook, I kept thinking that the 1970s would soon be calling and asking for their apologetics back. Basically, Hanegraaff is reheating long debunked arguments. I'm not going to go over every one of his arguments that he made, as it would take too long, and there are others who have done it better. However, I would like to discuss Chapter 1, where Hanegraaff dedicates considerable effort to challenging contemporary science, targeting the theory of evolution specifically. While I concur with his assessment that the debate around evolution is central to contemporary Christianity, I also believe that evolution poses significant challenges to the traditional Christian belief about God. However, I diverge from Hanegraaff on the point of the efficacy of his arguments. Relying on ad hominem attacks and making de jure arguments doesn't undermine the authority of evolutionary evidence. Hanegraaff frequently critiques figures like Charles Darwin and other notable evolutionary proponents, labeling them as racist or as fervently anti-religious. However, he misses a crucial point, that even if such allegations were true, which they're not, they wouldn't challenge the factual nature of the evolutionary process. His de jure arguments suggest that accepting evolution leads to nihilism. However, this does not discredit the substantial evidence supporting evolution's occurrence. Hanegraaff brings up past missteps in the scientific exploration of evolution, referencing instances such as Pithecanthropus erectus, Piltdown Man, and Peking Man. While it's true that some of the early anthropologists either exaggerated their discoveries or engaged in downright deception, it's essential to acknowledge the scientific community's role in uncovering these discrepancies and lies. Inaccuracies or falsifications in science are typically exposed through further research and investigation by other scientists who try to build upon or replicate the previous findings. This self-correcting nature is one of the strengths of the scientific method. Rather than fully engaging in the self-regulatory mechanism inherent in the scientific inquiry, Hanegraaff focuses on how a few instances of deception in order to divert the attention of his readers from the overwhelming evidence supporting human evolution. Like an adept magician, his emphasis on past mistakes seeks to overshadow the genuine and robust evidence in favor of the evolutionary theory. Maybe in another video, I will delve into and address his specific critiques, but the purpose of this video is a book review, so I don't want to go too far afield at this time. In the book's part 2, Hanegraaff delves into his newfound Eastern Orthodox spiritual perspective, through which I gained significant insight into the Eastern Orthodox faith. A particularly intriguing concept I came across was that of deification. As Eastern Orthodox belief goes, individuals can join the Godhead through this process. This was new to me, and if I were still a Christian, I would find it blasphemous. But here's the chapter title on page 87, Deification, Becoming Gods by Grace. Although I don't feel compelled to counter his stance on Eastern Orthodox view of deification, mainly because I don't believe that there's adequate evidence for the existence of a soul or of a God who desires to have union with it, a particular analogy that Hank uses on page 177 caught my attention. He likens the sexual act to the profound bond that God seeks with humanity. Here's the quote. Sexual union, however, is even more profound than procreational and paradistical pleasure. It is the mysterious parable of Christ and his church. And I want to say that without passing judgment on Hank, I have to admit that I found his analogy a little bit too kinky for my tastes. In chapter 5, titled Ecclesia, Hank emphasizes the significance of understanding the Eucharist as the true body of Christ, insisting that it is essential for genuine believers to partake in it. I can't help but think that this is a little hard to swallow, especially given the stale, hard wafers that I remember from my own taking of communion when I was younger. While Hank and his newfound friends might have fun pretending that they are cannibals, I respectfully decline any invitation to dine at his residence, should he ever extend one to me. In another part, Hank revisits the topic of sexuality and delves into the idea of the Virgin Mary's perpetual virginity. He ardently tries to persuade readers that the references in Matthew chapter 12, verse 46 and 47, which I'll read for you now, "Yet while he talked to the people, behold, his mother and brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee." Hank claims that this does not allude to Mary's biological children, but insists that it was Jesus' cousins and step-siblings. I remain unconvinced. Likewise, the assertion that Hank Hanegraaff makes that Mary's womb was a divine temple where Jesus resided is a stretch for me, as it would have been for her, had the temple actually been crammed into her uterus. To be frank, it seems quite probable that Mary's state as a virgin probably ended roughly 9 months before Christmas in year 0. I've mentioned it in one of my other videos, but I think one of the most holy aspects about the Virgin Mary is her alibi. But this is America, and while Hank has every right to freely discuss the sex life of a woman who lived 2,000 years ago, I'm equally entitled to make fun of him for it. For any evangelical Christians still regarding Hank Hanegraaff with high esteem, brace yourself, as chapter 5, Hank does not hold back in his critique of non-Orthodox Christian beliefs. He cites St. Cyprian on page 125, stating, "No one can have God for his father who does not have the church for his mother." Now, what church is he referring to, you might wonder? Hank clarifies. He means those that acknowledge the true presence of Christ in communion. Unsurprisingly, this does not include your local neighborhood Baptist, Presbyterian, or Methodist church, but it points squarely to the bearded boys in black of the Orthodox Christian Church. In Chapter 6, Hank delves into an unexpected discussion on nuclear fusion and fission. He draws parallels between the potential for nuclear fusion as an ultimate energy solution and the concept of religious fusion, contrasting it with the destructive power of nuclear fission, evident in nuclear bombs and power plant meltdowns. In contrasting with the safer nuclear fusion, he likens Protestant Christianity to radioactive waste. While he doesn't hold back criticism of the Roman Catholic Church, his particular aversion to Protestantism is evident. Interestingly, Hank does share some positive remarks about a few Protestant ministers with whom he has had the opportunity to play golf with. And yes, for those who are skeptical about this intriguing detail, it can be found on page 203. The epilogue introduces a perspective that intertwines Islamophobia with the contentious Great Replacement conspiracy theory. It asserts that atheists are driving Islamic immigration and insinuates that those with atheist or left-leaning beliefs desire Islam to be the dominant religion in the West. The extremity of this claim makes it challenging to address without feeling dismissive. Personally, I find criticisms amongst religious groups to be unproductive. Every religion has its gaps in logic. And for one follower of one religion to criticize another, it reflects a certain lack of self-awareness. Which leads me to the most profound insight that I gleaned from this book, which is the peril of unwavering dogmatism. Hank Hanegraaff, prior to his 2017 conversion to Eastern Orthodoxy, was the preeminent Protestant apologist. Yet, post-conversion, he became equally strident against non-Orthodox Christian denominations. Such drastic shifts spotlight the dangers of rigid thinking. When individuals become so anchored to a single perspective that they dismiss compelling counterarguments or new information, they not only limit their personal growth, but they can also stymie social advancement. The case of Hanegraaff, who transitioned from one staunch viewpoint to another with the undiminished zeal, often signifies not an authentic transformation, but perhaps a craving for absolute certainty rather than genuine pursuit of understanding. Humility and open-mindedness are vital counterbalances to dogmatic pitfalls. Truly recognizing the expanse of what we do not know requires a deep sense of humility. Additionally, an open-minded approach ensures that we welcome new ideas and challenges to our fundamental beliefs. In conclusion, I would urge the listeners of this video to introspect. Think about convictions that you staunchly held maybe 10 years ago, only to later revisit and forsake them. What instigated these shifts? This reflection accentuates the malleability of human belief. As we steer our personal and collective paths, adaptability, curiosity, and the readiness to change are imperative. Such qualities fortify us and society, preparing both for a continually transforming world. Regrettably, Hank Hanegraaff's journey appears more a search for unwavering truths than of true enlightenment. Rather than realizing the often subjective nature of all religious experience, he merely changes allegiances. Nonetheless, his story can serve as an important cautionary tale, promoting us to avoid mirroring his errors. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book, but I would say it is a cautionary tale.